Today on the deep dive, we're uh, really tackling a topic that's a lightning rod, Sharia law.
Definitely one that sparks debate.
Yeah, big debates, deep divisions. We're focusing on its place, or maybe the perception of its place,
Mhm.
in Western societies. And we've got some great sources lined up. Our goal here is really to explore the complexities, look at the context, the history.
And challenge some stereotypes along the way.
Exactly. Try to get a balanced perspective on its potential role in, our pluralistic societies.
And it's still so contentious, isn't it? I mean, right now, July 25th, 2025, this debate is very much alive. You've got this core tension. For some people, it's about religious freedom, a basic right.
Hmm.
But for others, it feels like a threat to secular values, to democratic norms. That tension is really palpable.
Okay, so let's unpack this then before we even talk about its place here. What is Sharia? Because there's so many ideas floating around, and maybe just as important, what isn't it?
That's absolutely the place to start. So Sharia, the word itself means path or way in Arabic. Fundamentally, it's a framework, Islamic principles drawn from the Quran and the Hadith.
Those are the Prophet Muhammad's sayings and actions.
Exactly, key sources of guidance. Plus, you have centuries of scholarly interpretation built on top of that. It covers a lot personal behavior, family life, ethics, and sometimes, yes, legal systems in certain places. But here's the crucial point, the one that often gets missed. Sharia is not one single rigid book of laws.
Right. Not like a civil code you just look up.
Precisely. It's dynamic. It's interpreted differently across Muslim communities and countries. Think about, say, Tunisia. Sharia informs family law there, but it coexists with secular government. Then compare that to Saudi Arabia, where Sharia has a much more dominant role in the legal system overall. Very different applications.
That nuanced framework versus rigid code feels really important, and you mentioned a study.
Yeah, a 2023 Pew Research Center study found that 59% of Muslims globally see Sharia primarily as a personal guide.
A personal guide, not necessarily state law they want imposed.
Exactly. It guides their own lives, their ethics, their relationship with God. But that flexibility, that personal aspect, it often gets lost in Western conversations.
So why does it get so misunderstood here?
Well, a big part is media focus. You tend to see coverage zeroing in on extreme practices, harsh punishments in very specific contexts. Those represent a tiny fraction of how Sharia is applied globally, but they dominate the narrative.
And that creates fear.
It absolutely fuels fear. You saw that 2024 Gallup poll, 38% of Americans worried about a Sharia takeover, which, given how Sharia actually functions in the West, mainly in personal life, is, well, it's pretty unfounded. What gets completely overlooked is the emphasis within Sharia on things like charity, justice, community.
Values we'd recognize anywhere.
Universal values, really,
Yep.
but they're rarely part of the public discussion about Sharia.
It's fascinating how those positive aspects get sidelined.
Mhm.
Really highlights a kind of blind spot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So this resistance, this fear factor, where does it really stem from beyond just media snippets? It sounds like misconceptions meet cultural anxiety.
That's a good way to put it. The media equation of Sharia oppression is powerful, even if it's based on rare cases. Remember that 2022 BBC report on UK Sharia councils? It focused on divorce disputes, which is a valid point of discussion.
Yeah.
But it didn't really emphasize enough that these are voluntary councils. People choose to go to them, usually for resolving community matters within the bounds of UK law. Then you add political rhetoric on top. Politicians in the US, in Europe, framing Sharia as just incompatible with democracy.
Like those anti-Sharia bills.
Exactly. In 2017, 12 U.S. states introduced them. And the Southern Poverty Law Center pointed out there was zero evidence Sharia was actually overriding secular law anywhere. It was addressing a non-existent problem.
And culturally, there's the secularism angle, right? Legal uniformity is important in many Western countries.
Definitely. Secularism is a cornerstone. So for some, any distinct legal or ethical framework like Sharia feels like a challenge to that idea of one law for everyone. That YouGov poll in 2024 showed it 45% of Europeans felt Sharia conflicts with their national laws. It reflects that underlying unease.
But hang on. Haven't other religious laws coexisted?
That's the crucial comparative point. You have Jewish Beth Din courts, for example. They handle things like divorces, commercial disputes within Jewish communities. They've operated alongside secular law for a long time in places like the UK and the US.
So why the difference in perception with Sharia?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It suggests the resistance might be less about the practical legalities and more about, specific cultural anxieties and maybe historical baggage associated with Islam in the West.
That's a really striking point. The inconsistency is telling. It forces you to ask what makes Sharia different in people's minds. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the human side. For Muslims living in the West, what does Sharia actually mean in their daily lives? You said it's more than rules.
Absolutely. It's a way of life. It guides everything from daily prayers to giving charity, that's zakat, to making ethical choices in business or personal relationships. It shapes their moral compass.
And in terms of demographics?
Well, Pew Research in 2023 estimated Muslims are about 5% of Europe's population, maybe 1% in the US. And for most of them, Sharia is practiced privately. It influences, say, what they eat halal food, how they might dress, family relationships, financial dealings, perhaps.
Do we have any specific examples?
Yeah, I remember reading about Amina, a British Muslim interviewed in London this year, 2025. She runs a bakery, and she talked about using Sharia principles for her business ethics, ensuring everything was halal, yes, but also donating a share of profits to charity. And she said something really powerful. Sharia is my compass, not a law I impose on others.
My compass, not a law I impose. That really cuts through the noise, doesn't it? Reframes it entirely.
It does. It shows that personal guiding aspect.
And fundamentally practicing your faith like that, using it as a moral compass, that's a core Western value too, right? Freedom of religion?
It's enshrined everywhere. U.S. First Amendment, Article 9 of the European Convention on Human Rights, it's fundamental.
So denying that space.
Risks alienation. It can push communities away. There was a 2023 RAND study that found a link between social exclusion and vulnerability to radicalization. So finding that balance, protecting religious freedom while upholding secular governance, that's really the tightrope we're walking in this whole debate.
Okay, so given that personal aspect, how is Sharia operating in more formal ways in the West right now? Are there actual systems, even limited ones?
Yes, there are, and they tend to be quite limited and regulated. The UK is probably the most discussed example. You have Sharia councils, like the Islamic Sharia Council in Leighton. They primarily deal with marriage, divorce, sometimes inheritance disputes.
Oh, crucially.
Crucially, people opt in. It's voluntary. And a 2018 UK government review confirmed they operate within the framework of British law. Apparently, they resolve something like a form of community-based dispute resolution, yes. We heard about Fatima, a teacher, who used a council in 2024 for her Islamic divorce, the Kula, after her civil one. Now, there are ongoing debates, particularly around gender equity concerns in some council rulings, and that's important. Calls for better oversight and standardization exist.
Right. It's not without controversy.
Not at all, but it does show a model of regulated coexistence is possible.
Are there other examples, maybe where things went differently?
Yeah, look at Canada. Ontario considered allowing formal Sharia-based arbitration back in 2005, but there was significant public backlash, and they ultimately rejected it, sticking purely with secular family law for official purposes.
But does that mean Sharia guidance disappeared?
No, informal guidance still happens. Imams might mediate disputes privately within the community, just not with state sanction. And in the U.S., Sharia isn't part of the legal system at all, but it influences personal contracts.
Like finance.
Exactly. Islamic mortgages are a key example. They're structured to avoid interest. Or riba, which is prohibited in Sharia. A 2023 report estimated about 10,000 Muslims use them annually in the U.S.
So across these examples, the common thread seems to be limited scope, voluntary participation.
And operating within, not replacing, secular law. It directly counters that creeping Sharia fear-mongering.
Okay, so if it can coexist, could it actually benefit Western societies?
Yeah.
Going beyond just tolerance to actual positive contribution, that feels like the next question.
It's a really interesting one to consider. And potentially, yes, thoughtful integration could strengthen pluralism. Think about community cohesion. If you have transparent, well-regulated Sharia councils, they can address specific needs within the Muslim community: halal food standards, Islamic wills, dispute resolution. This can actually reduce alienation. That University of Birmingham study in 2024, it found 70% of UK Muslims felt more integrated when their religious practices were accommodated.
That's counterintuitive to the fear narrative. Accommodation leading to integration.
Precisely. And then there's the ethical side. Take zakat, the charity aspect, 2.5% of wealth annually.
We mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, that principle, that practice, could inspire broader social welfare thinking. You see it in action in places like Dearborn, Michigan. Those Muslim-led food drives in 2024 distributed 50,000 meals benefiting everyone, not just Muslims. It's community action rooted in faith.
So ethical frameworks contributing tangible good.
And the ethical frameworks themselves, principles of justice, compassion, and Sharia, often mirror secular human rights ideals. There's overlap. Even the prohibition on usury, riba we mentioned with mortgages, that's fed into the global conversation about ethical banking. Islamic finance is a $4 trillion market now, according to Reuters this year.
So exploring these
It
overlap.
could genuinely enrich our cultural fabric, foster mutual respect while upholding diversity. It's not necessarily an either-or.
Of course, we have to be realistic. There are legitimate concerns, real criticisms. What are the main friction points we need to acknowledge?
Absolutely. It's crucial not to gloss over the challenges. Gender equity is probably the biggest flashpoint. Some interpretations, especially around family law, can conflict sharply with Western norms of equality between sexes. Male authority might be prioritized in ways that are unacceptable.
And there's evidence of problems.
Yes, that 2023 Amnesty International report was critical of some Sharia councils, suggesting they sometimes pressured women into unfair divorce settlements. It highlights the absolute need for strong oversight and accountability. Ensuring women's rights are protected has to be paramount.
And then there's the public perception battle.
Huge challenge. Those anti-Sharia campaigns, often based on outright misinformation, they really do stir up division. That X-analysis finding 1.2 million #BanSharia posts, many spreading false ideas about forced implementation. It poisons the well for calm discussion.
And that can lead to backlash, especially in places with strict secularism.
Right, like France's laïcité. There, even private religious practices can face pushback. That 2024 IFOP poll showed 60% oppose any religious tribunals. So, trying to accommodate Sharia, even in limited ways, risks alienating parts of the non-Muslim population if it's not handled very carefully.
It's a delicate balance.
Incredibly delicate. How do you accommodate religious needs without triggering backlash or marginalizing the very community you're trying to include? That's the tightrope.
So where does that leave us? How do we move past this polarization towards something more productive, more informed?
Nuance is key. We have to move beyond the black and white polarized shouting match. Open dialogue, one that's genuinely grounded in facts, not fear, is the only way to dispel the myths. We need more initiatives like that Faith in the City event in London in 2024, bringing people together to actually talk about religious pluralism.
And listening to individual voices.
Critically important, hearing from people like Amina, the baker, understanding Sharia as a lived reality, as a compass that humanizes it. It takes it out of the realm of scary abstraction.
The media's role here feels huge, too.
Massive. It needs a conscious shift away from just sensationalizing the extremes. Focus on the diversity of practice, how it actually works for most people. That 2025 BBC documentary on the UK councils, reaching 3 million viewers, showing their voluntary nature, that's a step in the right direction. More of that is needed.
So the path forward involves
Embracing diversity while holding firm on core secular principles and universal rights. Things like regulated councils, clear legal boundaries so everyone knows where things stand, plus ongoing public education. That can bridge the gaps. Because ignoring or just vilifying Sharia isn't a solution. It risks alienating nearly 2 billion Muslims worldwide.
whereas thoughtful integration.
Could actually strengthen our pluralistic values, making our societies richer and more resilient.
Okay, let's bring it all together. Circling back to that initial question, does Western society need Sharia law? What we've really explored today suggests the answer isn't a simple yes or no. Sharia, as that personal guide, that compass for Muslims like Amina, well, it's already here.
It's part of the lived reality for many citizens, shaping choices without really threatening secular legal systems.
And those regulated forms, like the UK councils, show that a level of coexistence is definitely possible, maybe even beneficial for community cohesion.
Exactly. But the challenges are real. Gender equity needs constant attention and safeguarding. Public fear, often driven by bad information, needs countering with facts. Cultural clashes need careful navigation. Ultimately, it feels less like a question of need and more about understanding. How do we best balance religious freedom for all with the secular values that underpin Western societies? That's the ongoing work.
So a final thought for you listening. What really stands out to you from this deep dive? Do you see Sharia having a place in the West as it currently exists? Or are those risks of misunderstanding just too significant right now? We encourage you to think about that. And hey, for more deep dives like this one, getting into complex topics, make sure you visit Mind Expansion Daily. You can find loads of great information there. Please do like and subscribe to Mind Expansion Daily wherever you're listening to us right now. And challenge yourself, leave a comment below. Do you agree with how we've tried to summarize this? Disagree? We genuinely want to hear your perspective on this complex issue.